They don't want retail holders to see this. You can call that dramatic, but you know exactly what I mean. There are pieces of information in this space that get amplified instantly, and then there are the pieces that feel like they're being smothered under a pillow. Not disappeared, not deleted, just buried. Made inconvenient, made easy to overlook, made to blend in with noise so no one pays attention. But you felt it, didn't you? Something is changing with these two. XDC and XLM aren't behaving like altcoins anymore. They're behaving like foundations, like someone quietly rewired a piece of global infrastructure and forgot to tell the world. And the irony of all of this is that people still see them as simple. Oh, XLM? Isn't that just for remittances? Oh, XDC? Isn't that some enterprise chain nobody uses? That's how shallow the average take is. People are so obsessed with shiny price spikes that they forget to look at the plumbing, the systems, the rails that silently move value from one end of the world to the other while the rest of crypto is arguing about memes and influencers. But something shifted. You can feel it in your stomach. You can feel it in the way big accounts suddenly choose their words more carefully when talking about these networks. You can feel it in how institutions mention them without sounding speculative, almost like they've been integrating them behind closed doors and only now realize the conversation is spilling into the open. And maybe I'm crazy, but there's a certain vibe you get when the people in power start acting nervous. Not scared, just uncomfortable. Like something slipped earlier than they planned. Like retail wasn't supposed to notice the patterns yet. Because once retail notices, once people start connecting dots on their own, that's when control slips. That's when the narrative changes hands. And that's when a coin stops being just a coin and starts becoming a threat. XDC and XLM are sitting in that threat zone now. Not because they're volatile. Not because they're popular. But because they're functional. They work. They solve real problems. And in crypto, the projects that actually solve problems are the ones that scare the people who built their careers on maintaining slow, outdated systems. What made this moment hit so hard for me wasn't just the news itself. It was the timing. The quiet timing. No fireworks. No loud announcements. Just this strange, eerie shift in tone that you only feel if you're genuinely paying attention. Almost like the world finally blinked and, for a split second, you could see the wires behind the curtain. You could see what they're constructing. You could see the shape of the thing they're trying to roll out without letting anyone see it too early. And here's the part nobody wants to admit. Both XDC and XLM have been underestimated for so long that people forgot what they were capable of. They forgot how deeply these networks are embedded into conversations about real-world adoption. They forgot the paperwork, the partnerships, the infrastructure plays, the enterprise corridors, the cross-border frameworks. They forgot the systems that hum quietly in the background, the ones without flashy marketing but with very real, very powerful intentions. But that's the thing about quiet giants. They don't need noise to change the world. They just need the right moment. And I think this might be that moment. Because what I saw, what thousands of you felt this week, it didn't feel accidental. Felt like a crack in the wall, a leak in the narrative, a glimpse behind the curtain. We were never meant to see this early. And if this is the beginning of something, if this is the spark before the bigger reveal, then XDC and XLM holders, you're not just early. You're positioned. You're aligned with something quietly massive. And I have a feeling the world is going to pretend they always knew. But we know better. It's wild how sometimes you feel like you've been staring at the charts so long that everything looks the same. Until suddenly, something changes. Not loud, not flashy. Just a quiet move behind the scenes that makes you sit up and whisper, "Wait, what am I looking at right now?" That's exactly what's been happening with XDC and XLM. These two networks, the ones people used to joke about, the ones influencers ignored for years, are suddenly showing signs of life that the mainstream crypto crowd has no idea how to interpret yet. And honestly, that's the craziest part. It's happening in real time. While everyone screams about Bitcoin having cycles and ETF narratives, the real infrastructure shift is unfolding inside ecosystems designed for settlement, messaging, and institutional-grade transfers. The thing people always miss is this: markets don't move when retail gets excited. Markets move when the quiet giants make decisions. Banks, payment providers, fintech rails, enterprise-grade platforms, These are the entities that determine what runs the next era of global value transfer. And when it comes to those silent giants, XLM and XDC are becoming unavoidable topics. It's almost funny because, on the surface, neither project behaves like a hype token. They don't explode randomly. They don't trend on Twitter every 2 weeks. They don't depend on influencers shouting to the moon. Instead, they keep quietly shipping upgrades, adding institutional partners, expanding regional adoption, and strengthening the one thing the crypto world never pays enough attention to: real-world utility. And honestly, maybe that's why people underestimate them. Because let's be real, crypto is loud. People want fireworks, not paperwork. They want viral predictions, not infrastructure upgrades. So when Stellar pushes advancements in cross-border payments or XDC expands integrations across trade finance networks, most retail investors scroll past it like it's nothing. They don't see that these are the exact foundations needed to support trillion-dollar flows later. They don't realize that the crypto projects destined to survive the next 3 cycles are the ones building things that governments, regulators, and enterprises can actually use. And that's where both XLM and XDC suddenly look insanely ahead of the curve. But here's where it gets even crazier. Both networks aren't just building quietly. They're converging toward a use case environment that's becoming impossible for big institutions to ignore. Think about it. XLM is laser-focused on seamless global payments and financial inclusion. XDC is laser-focused on digitizing trade finance, tokenizing documents, and creating transparency in a system that's been stuck in the 1970s. These two don't compete. They complement each other. They sit on 2 different ends of the value transfer pipeline, and the world they're being built for is the world everyone keeps pretending is years away. But no, it's here now. Trade networks are upgrading. Cross-border payments are shifting from Swift-era delays to instant rails. Compliance systems are moving toward tokenized auditing. Regulators are realizing blockchain isn't optional anymore. It's inevitable. And suddenly the question becomes, which networks already fit into the world these institutions want? Bitcoin doesn't. Most Ethereum tokens don't. Meme coins definitely don't. But XLM? XDC? They're built like they were designed specifically for this transition. And if you've been paying attention, you can see the early signals everywhere. The rise of tokenized treasury products. The shift toward ISO 20022 compliant infrastructures. The explosion of interest in real-world asset platforms. The global pressure on outdated financial rails. These aren't isolated events. These are puzzle pieces. And XLM and XDC sit directly in the center of what that puzzle is forming into. You know that moment when you're watching a movie and everything suddenly clicks? Like all the hints you ignored earlier finally make sense? That's what this feels like. Let's be honest for a second. If you hold XDC or XLM, you didn't get into them because you wanted hype. You got in because something about these networks made you pause. Maybe it was the efficiency, the speed, the enterprise adoption, the links to trade networks, the compliance-first design. Something told you this wasn't a casino token. And now, in 2025, that instinct is turning into something harder to ignore. Because the early signs of a narrative shift are already showing. People who once dismissed these chains are starting to ask, wait, how did I miss this? Institutions that never looked at crypto before are suddenly exploring tokenized settlement infrastructure. Governments are experimenting with blockchain rails for regulated markets. And the funniest part? XLM and XDC have been preparing for this exact moment, quietly, for years. There's also something bigger happening beneath the surface, something almost philosophical. Crypto began as a rebellion against traditional finance, but the future of crypto is clearly merging back into that world. Not in a restrictive way, but in a collaborative one. The new financial system won't be built outside the old one. It will be built through it. And the networks that understand that, the networks that offer compliance, scalability, and real-world integration, will be the ones that survive and dominate. This is where XLM and XDC separate themselves from the noise. Because while people argue about which meme coin will do another 100x, these two ecosystems are being quietly embedded into the future of how value moves across borders, across companies, and across entire industries. And that's why they don't want you to see this. Not literally some evil overlord trying to hide charts, but in the sense that the mainstream crypto conversation is always focused on the wrong things. The drama, the hype cycles, the narratives that attract views but not understanding. Meanwhile, the real money, the institutional money, is positioning itself around infrastructure, around utility, around reliability. And guess which networks check those boxes with almost suspicious accuracy? XDC, built for trade finance, a trillion-dollar bottleneck desperately needing modernization. XLM, built for frictionless global payments, the backbone of global commerce. It's like watching two puzzle pieces finally click together. And yet 95% of retail investors still have no clue what's happening. So when you hear people laugh, when people downplay these networks, when people act like nothing is happening, just remember, silence is often the loudest signal. Real adoption doesn't trend. Real infrastructure doesn't scream. It integrates. It stabilizes. It expands quietly until one day everyone wakes up and says, "Wait, when did this become standard?" And right now, XLM and XDC are moving exactly like networks that are on the edge of becoming standard. The real kicker with XDC and XLM isn't just what they do individually. It's how their trajectories are converging right now, quietly under the radar. The mainstream narrative wants you to think crypto is about fast pumps, moonshots, and hype cycles. But anyone paying attention knows that's a distraction. Real change in this space comes from the networks that solve actual problems. The ones that make life easier, faster, cheaper, and more transparent. That's XDC and XLM. And the thing is, nobody outside of those paying attention yet fully realizes just how serious this is. Most people still think these are minor players, small-time chains that might bounce here and there. That's why they're getting overlooked, underappreciated, and underexposed. And that's exactly why the moment they hit, it's going to feel shocking to everyone else. You have to understand the human side of this. Being an early holder isn't just about potential profits. It's about awareness. It's about seeing the puzzle before anyone else does and positioning yourself in the right place. You remember all those moments when you felt alone because nobody around you understood why you believed in XDC or XLM. You remember the mockery, the skepticism, the sideways looks? Those feelings aren't just memories. They're the emotional foundation for understanding how disruptive this can become. Because when something the world dismissed suddenly proves itself, it hits differently. Not like a chart spike, but like validation for intuition. It's deeply human. You feel the years of patience finally lining up with reality. And that's where the real shock comes in, the fact that both networks are quietly preparing the same ground. XLM has been building partnerships for cross-border payments, connecting underserved regions with reliable financial infrastructure. XDC has been integrating with trade finance systems, making the movement of goods, contracts, and value faster, transparent, and auditable. On the surface, they seem like separate projects. But if you connect the dots, you see they're both forming the skeleton of a system the world hasn't fully acknowledged yet. They're quietly becoming infrastructure layers that institutions, corporations, and governments will find impossible to ignore. And you don't need charts to see that. You just need context. You just need patience. You just need to pay attention. Now, think about the implications. Not just for price or speculation, but for adoption. Once large institutions start using these systems, once governments realize their efficiency, the playing field changes completely. We're not talking about short-term hype. We're talking about the kind of structural changes that will ripple through multiple sectors, from global banking to corporate finance, from cross-border trade to remittances, from regional settlement solutions to enterprise logistics. XDC and XLM are the backbones of that future. And the scary part for outsiders is that it's happening silently, quietly, without the fanfare, without the noise, without the clamor. That's why most people don't see it coming. That's why so few are prepared. There's also a psychological layer here. People love to chase what's loud, visible, and easily measurable: charts, headlines, influencers. But utility doesn't scream. It doesn't trend on TikTok. It doesn't go viral in a Discord server. It just works. It just integrates. It just scales. And when that moment of visibility finally arrives, when institutions and the market acknowledge the function over the hype, The shockwave will feel massive because people will realize they've been blind to the obvious. XDC and XLM holders already know this. That's why you feel it in your chest when you see the small signals, the partnerships, the integration announcements, the compliance alignments. Because you know that the quiet work done today will dominate tomorrow. And that gives you a strange mixture of anticipation and calm, because you're already aligned with the trajectory. Another thing people miss is timing. Crypto moves fast, but real infrastructure takes patience. You can't force adoption of a network like XLM or XDC. You can't fake trust in a system that governs billions of dollars in movement and documentation. You can't hype compliance. So these projects move slowly, steadily, and intentionally. And that makes the moment they finally hit the mainstream feel abrupt, like it came out of nowhere. But we know better. We can trace it. We can see the layers, the groundwork, the steady accumulation of relevance. That's why this is so different from typical market drama. This isn't a pump. This isn't a narrative spin. This is the actual world starting to notice systems that have been quietly dominant for years. And the final part of this, the part that makes your chest tighten, is understanding how rare this alignment is. XDC and XLM aren't just two coins trending at the same time. They're two networks converging in purpose, complementary in function, overlapping in adoption, and quietly setting the stage for a broader structural shift. That doesn't happen often. Most coins in crypto compete. They fight for attention. They chase liquidity. They rely on speculation. But XDC and XLM? They ignore noise. They build. They integrate. They function. And that's why when the mainstream finally notices, it will feel like the floor moved under everyone else's feet, while you've been standing on the foundation all along, steady, patient, ready. If you've ever felt alone in believing in these networks, this is the vindication moment. Not the peak. Not the final victory. Just the first real acknowledgement of the groundwork. And the way I see it, the next phase, the real expansion, the real adoption, the shock to everyone else, hasn't even started yet. But we already know the trajectory. And the energy of this moment is unmistakable. It's electric. It's the quiet hum of inevitability. The kind of hum that tells you, the world isn't ready yet, but it's coming. And when it arrives, it will change everything for those who were paying attention. There's this weird moment in crypto when everything slows down for just a second, like the world is holding its breath. You know that feeling, staring at the screen, heart beating a little faster, because you see something that feels bigger than yourself, bigger than the charts, bigger than anyone else seems to notice. That's exactly what's happening with XDC and XLM right now. This isn't about pumps or hype. It's about networks quietly taking the pieces of the financial world that are broken, messy, and outdated, and rebuilding them in ways nobody thought possible. And the scary, exciting, electric part is that it's happening without fanfare. It's happening quietly, right under the noses of the people who think they understand crypto. If you're holding XDC or XLM, you already feel it. You've been part of something almost invisible, almost ignored, while the world scrambled to chase drama and memes. And now, suddenly, the world is starting to notice. Banks, institutions, corporations, regulators, they're all paying attention in a way that used to feel impossible. And you can feel the tension in the air, the recognition that the quiet players, the ones building infrastructure instead of hype, are the ones shaping the next era. That's why this moment feels like it's vibrating under your skin. It's not a headline. It's a shift, a tectonic movement. And it's only going to get louder from here. Here's the truth nobody says out loud. The shock isn't over. The narrative isn't complete. We're at the beginning of a story that's been unfolding for years. A story most people didn't see. XDC and XLM are still being underestimated, still quietly expanding, still integrating with systems and institutions that will define the next decade of financial flows. The moment the mainstream catches up, it will feel abrupt, chaotic, almost unfair. But if you've been paying attention, you'll already know the script. You'll already be aligned. You'll already understand the story before it becomes obvious to everyone else. And that's why now is the time to be intentional. To understand that holding these networks isn't about luck. It's about awareness. It's about seeing the real signals while everyone else chases noise. It's about recognizing the quiet shift that is about to shake the system. Because the future isn't coming to those who scroll aimlessly. The future is coming to those who recognize opportunity before it's framed as such. And XDC and XLM holders are exactly in that position. You've been quiet, patient, observant. And that patience? It's about to be rewarded in ways the mainstream hasn't even imagined yet. So if this video hit you somewhere deep, if it made you feel that familiar tingle of wait, they're hiding something, here's what you need to do. Don't just scroll away. Hit like because that helps other people discover this too. Subscribe if you haven't, because we're breaking these moments down before anyone else explains them. Drop a comment. Tell me how long you've been holding XDC or XLM, and how this moment feels to you. I read every comment. I want to hear your story, your intuition, your gut reaction. This isn't just another crypto video. This is a heads up, a reality check, a chance to be part of something that will change how people think about finance and value transfer. XDC and XLM are quietly rewriting the rules, and if you're paying attention right now, you're already ahead. The world will notice soon. The question is, will you be ready when it does?